Hello and welcome back to the Marketing Chat Room. I'm Kayla Bryant here today with Nick Power, the LinkedIn legend. Super excited to be diving in today with him and hearing a little bit more of his story and his experiences, both in the marketing world and, of course, on LinkedIn. So, welcome, Nick. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Kayla, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So let's just dive right in. As Nick Power, what has been your experience with the Nick Power movement?
I don't it's funny. I feel like I've gotten more attention than I'm kind of due on the platform, and I think, it's been really fun and weird in a way because it's not something I'm used to. And like so that's been like an adjustment for me, but just meeting a ton of people and having a ton of conversations that I never would have had I not, started writing more on LinkedIn and kind of just being more myself on there. That's been like crazy and super, super valuable to me, like as a human, but also as a marketer, just like learning and, kind of absorbing all that. So, definitely a wild ride and excited to keep seeing where it goes.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. And just wanted to thank you as one of the people who's been part of this experience for kind of giving a lot of us permission to be ourselves more so on LinkedIn, and just kind of put our almost like stream of consciousness thoughts out there for the LinkedIn universe, because that's definitely been a shift this year.
Yeah, I think like we're all having kind of a fun moment here together, and so that's kind of where how I see it is like, um, it just takes like a handful of people to kind of open the door, and then we're all like, wow, like now that door's open, let's all run through it, kind of. So, I appreciate everybody kind of, being so like kind and supportive towards me, but also just kind of like jumping behind, what's happening on LinkedIn and just kind of like being a little more authentic and a little bit more like transparent and just kind of just letting it fly. Like that's been really exciting for me. And I just, it's a place that I actually want to be more now. So that's been cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of resonates for a lot of us, at least if we're on the right side of LinkedIn, the right algorithm of LinkedIn recently. It has felt a lot more fun. And the people that I've like interviewed lately and talked to and even just chatted in real life with about LinkedIn, which is a funny thing to do, we're just like having a good time there, which is nice and new.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think too, like, I think the platform it's meant to be a place to connect, and like I feel like I see a lot more of that happening now, and so that's been really exciting and really fulfilling. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's been cool to watch and experience too, and just kind of like, they say like you should have fun at work if you or enjoy what you do at least. And I feel like LinkedIn is now kind of an extension of that for a lot of us in the marketing space.
totally. And I think like, I think about like a networking event, right? Like a lot of the stuff that, you at least that I felt like I was seeing on LinkedIn before this year was stuff that I would never hear at a networking event. You know what I mean? Like just very like kind of postured a little bit and like, sort of almost too packaged. And I think now we're kind of getting into that, like we're in a room together just chatting. Like it's okay, you can be yourself. So I think that's been one of the like the more exciting things for me is just kind of getting to know people better and actually connect versus just hearing, the business pitch and the brochures.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It kind of reminds me personally of Twitter in like 2010. It's
Mhm.
giving those similar types of vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is fun. So talk to me about how long you've been kind of active or posting on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I've had LinkedIn since I graduated college. I'm not gonna date myself and say when that was, but I hadn't really used it all that much until about 2 years ago. I started posting pretty much every day. And just experimenting a lot with it, but a lot of it was like kind of the more standard thought leadership stuff. Like, as a marketer, I was writing about marketing, I was writing about branding, was writing about, stuff like attribution and ROI and all that stuff. And I was like it was good for me to sort of find my voice and um, but I think I was kind of following a lot of rules that I had internalized, like that, sort of like you walk into a room and you want to act like everybody that's in that room. And so I think I was just kind of putting that stuff out there. And after a while, sort of realized that it was essentially a version of what everybody else was saying. You know what I mean? Like, which wasn't, it's not a bad thing. It's just like, I was kind of like, okay, what am I contributing here that is me, that, that's really unique. And so, really started to pick up for me in the last like 6 months ish, really the last 4 months, like basically this year. Um, and just kind of changed up what I was doing there based on a lot of the things that I was seeing both on LinkedIn, but also like zooming out, like, just in the social media world and also in just the world in general, like with where we're at politically and where we're at with, things like that. So, um, yeah, kind of just changed it up and really just started leaning into it more and kind of being myself more and have reached a lot more people. And so, yeah, it's been good. It's been fun.
That's awesome. Okay, so does the shift in your tone to be like less corporate and more you align with kind of when you started gaining more followers and more reach?
Yeah. So when again, going back 2 years, when I started writing like marketing stuff, like I was, I was reaching people. I had like kind of a small group of friends and followings and followers and things like that. And I started writing memes back then too, like marketing memes. And so I think that's kind of where I started to like play with that like short form, humorous, one-liner type content. Um,
Uh-huh.
but then, you know, I think I started to really shift in January or February of this year. Things were really chaotic politically. I think, I started to notice that social media was shifting in a lot of ways where people were abandoning Facebook, people were abandoning Twitter, people were leaving, Instagram in a lot of ways, like it became more of a consumption channel. Even TikTok, like I think a lot of it is just, you're watching the stuff, but you're not necessarily engaging and commenting with people. And so I started to see all that stuff happening and then for myself, I was, like I said, I was kind of like, what am I, what am I adding to this conversation by writing marketing stuff? And yeah, so I just started writing a little bit more like off the cuff, like kind of the intrusive thoughts and like the more just the stuff that was in my head that was more high level and more like, where are we at in the world? Because I think, one of the things I always felt like with LinkedIn was like it's this place where we're talking about B2B and marketing and stuff, and that's fine. That's good. Like that's part of the platform. It's a business platform, but when things are so weird and off in the world, it was like kind of this weird disconnect or like almost like a little bit tone deaf feeling of like, are we really like not going to talk about this kind of thing here? So yeah, so I started writing that stuff in February and that's when it really started to pick up and I start like my reach just soared and hit 4.5 million impressions in March, gained like 10,000 followers in like 2 weeks. Um, it was crazy. It was a crazy month. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's when I started following you too. That's so cool. Love it. So have you noticed like now that you have a little bit of a larger following when you post just kind of like you said intrusive thoughts versus like more maybe polished marketing content or more I don't know like niche type of stuff related to marketing? Is there a difference in the engagement there?
Um, yeah, like I think, generally speaking, it's been way more engagement. And I don't really like I think of engagement more as like a signal of connection. Like, am I reaching people? Are people, you know, interested in what I'm saying? And also, are we having a conversation or am I just kind of like broadcasting, which I've kind of
Mhm.
struggled with that recently, to be honest, to get to every comment because there's just been so many. But um like yeah, I would say, when I was writing more marketing stuff, like yeah, I'd get some comments and some questions and things like that. But largely I've noticed that like interest in me as a person, but also in the place where I work, Noun Project, has been way, way, way higher since I've started just kind of like saying, things that I actually feel and things that I actually believe in and, stuff like that. Which isn't to say that I didn't, feel or believe in the things I was writing before that, but it's just, again, it was like, it's marketing. There's a lot of marketers on LinkedIn writing about marketing. So I think there was kind of this like, okay, what are you adding to the conversation feeling? So, um, but yeah, right now, like I'll put up something and I get anywhere between, 50 to 100 comments on it. And it's usually like um, that almost every post at this point. So it just feels
Yeah.
like those signals to me are the ones that I'm looking at for like, am I connecting with people or am I, just kind of broadcasting?
Yeah, it can be hard. I've been struggling a little bit with that too lately because it's such a fine line of like you want to be relatable. I mean, relationships are the whole point of marketing, right? Like actually connecting with people. And I think the things that you write do really resonate with a lot of people, which is why they're engaging. So it totally makes sense. But like when we put our professional marketing hat on, sometimes we're like, what am I doing? Like, what is it? Is this okay?
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like there is a little bit of that you have to break through where you're like, if I'm not talking about my business, if I'm not talking about my service, am I really trying to sell? And like, have I given it my best shot? Because like, look, I've got 3 kids. I need to put food on my table. Like there's nothing wrong with selling yourself or, using
Mhm.
using a business channel to do business objective things. But I will say that again, like um I think that the way that people are buying has changed. Like you'll see a lot of people say that on LinkedIn, but then it's like, okay, but how? Like what does that look like? And I think specifically on that channel, like, people are looking to connect with each other first before they dive into your business. And I think when at least from my perspective, when I was writing about like, my business first, it was kind of people were kind of like, why should I care about that? Like, I don't even know who you are. You know what I mean? And so I
Yeah.
think now it's like leading with, the whole personal brand concept. It's like, do people know me? Do they care about what I have to say first? And like, then they're kind of like, where do you work? Like, what do you do? And then they're like, oh, like, so then it clicks. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think that's honestly the right approach and seems to be kind of the way things are shifting this year or I don't know, this era, a weird time of the world that we're in.
mhm.
But that's really cool. And I love to see that. I love to see more like personal brand, more personal connections coming through. And if it leads to business, like awesome. I don't think people should look down on. I agree with what you said. Like we're all out here trying to do something,
Yeah,
and if we can support it with our personal brand, great.
yeah, for sure. I think that like, you know, and the other thing about the personal brand concept to me is like, it's not like the whole term personal brand makes me think of like talk about myself, you know what I mean? But really it's about being relatable and connecting with people. And so I think you have to figure out like, okay, I'm putting this content or this message out there to connect with these people. Like, what am I trying to connect on? Like, what is it that's in their heads, or what is it about them that I can sort of relate to and build like a bridge between myself and them through this piece of content. So I think that's where I see like a lot of personal branding, like kind of not struggle, but just like it seems like it's very focused on like the person that's writing it versus like delivering something that's valuable or relatable or engaging to the audience, which that's the whole point of the content, right?
Mhm.
That's why you're publishing it. So
Mhm. Yeah, good note. Love that. Um, so on the note of like we're all on LinkedIn for a reason, mainly because we have a job or we're trying to find a job.
yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your actual job at Noun Project and what you do there.
Yeah. Head of marketing at Noun Project. I just crossed my 1 year this week, actually. So excited
Nice.
about that. And we're the world's most diverse and extensive collection of icons and photos. So helping marketers and graphic designers and data analysts and business owners put together, compelling visual content like infographics or marketing slide decks or, you name it. So, and I think where we stand out is, we're more sort of honest small business type option than a lot of the bigger giants in the space. You know, if you think about the stock image space, it's big mega corporations with, you know, billions of images basically, and it's like, you know, you're kind of getting flooded with that corporate feel, and we're much more based on values and things like that. So um yeah, and basically just building out the marketing function there over the last year. So, you know, building out PPC ads and more email marketing, like a more robust email marketing system, doing a lot of content marketing and partnerships and things like that. So we're working on our annual list of graphic designers where we feature, you know, a bunch of really the world's best graphic designers, and kind of deliver that with several content partners. So it's really fun. I honestly like landing in the graphic design space, and sort of like it has connected me to a part of myself that I thought I lost from high school, because I was actually on track to be an artist before I went into marketing, and then I
Okay.
was like, I'm gonna starve if I go into art because I'm not that good at it. So, but it's been really enjoyable to get back into that stuff and play with it more.
Oh, that's really cool. So you get to combine kind of your creative passions into your actual career. Love that.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice. And what did you do before this? What was kind of your path into being a director of marketing?
Yeah. So graduated school with a psychology degree. Psychology, you know, it's a tough. You got to keep going in school to do anything like that. And I didn't really want to get into clinical psychology or anything like that. So kind of fell into sales and marketing as like a default. And started out working with a surfboard company. I was actually going door to door at retail stores selling surfboards to surf shops for a while. I
Fun.
was like a road salesman, and
Uh-huh.
then moved into a backpack startup company. Was there for like almost 8 years. Kind of built out their whole brand and marketing ecosystem. Moved into a men's skincare and grooming brand, another startup that was local to the area, and worked on their brand marketing for about a year and a half, and then went to another stock image company. Was there for about 4 years, and then moved to Noun Project this past year. So
Okay,
yeah, kind of
cool.
started out in the direct to consumer area, and then moved into the tech space and B2B like later on.
That's really cool. Yeah. Yeah. I like hearing about people's marketing journeys because I feel like they're often kind of like where we land wasn't planned.
It's I feel like most marketers that I've met did not like intentionally go into marketing. They sort of fell into it through, you know, they were creative or they were a good writer or, you know, something like that. And it's kind of interesting because I feel like you get such a wide variety of like perspective, and you know, it almost made me like anxious to talk about marketing for a long time, because I'm always like, is what I'm saying like the version of truth that someone else has experience with marketing? You know what I mean? And so I think that's been like a almost like a burden lifted off my shoulders when I stopped like focusing so much on talking about marketing and actually just doing marketing. Like for example with LinkedIn or, you know, things like that. Like um, I don't know, it just feels more like I can be like, this is how I see it versus like this is what marketing is. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I resonate with that too. I don't have 10 years of marketing experience. I used to teach elementary school. And so then like coming into this
Cool.
space, it's just, yeah, there's a lot of us out there, but I think that we can have a voice in the space too, and that's okay. But it is really easy to feel like, oh, like everyone has more experience than me, or everyone knows more than me about XYZ, which like sure they do, but that doesn't mean that I can't also talk about marketing.
100%. And you know, all my experiences with startups. So, you know, I get into a room with someone who's at a big, you know, big brand and it does feel a little bit like, overwhelming, or, you know, like I kind of want to shrink down a little bit from that, because I'm like, well, you know, they're running bigger budgets and things like that. But, it's, that's kind of the beauty of it, is like what I've seen, at least from my own experience, is the second you stop kind of weighing yourself against that stuff, you find ways to be way more creative and sort of like um, effective really with what you have than like comparing yourself to the big budget brand and being like, well, I couldn't possibly, like compete against them because they've got, $1 million a day in PPC ads and like, well, and I think, going through what I went through on LinkedIn was a great example of that, where I was like, I didn't use any AI. I didn't use any money or budget or anything like that. I was just like, I'm just gonna write things and
Hmm.
and that's all I did. So I don't know. It's just thinking about it like less in the context of a competition and more in just like a thought experiment or like kind of a journey of self-discovery.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's great advice, both for just individuals, personal brands, and regular brands too. Like you said, startups, smaller companies. We work with a lot of smaller companies at my agency, and that's so true. I mean, there's space for everyone. Sometimes it can be difficult to kind of like carve that space out or find your niche or find your audience, but like they're out there and there are ways to get through to them. It just sometimes takes some creativity
Totally.
and persistence,
Yeah.
as you know. Okay. What else do I want to ask you? One more big thing, and then I'll see what you want to close with. You've talked a little bit on LinkedIn about kind of being a quieter person, and I feel like that's given some other quieter people space to find their voice on LinkedIn. Talk to me a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So it's funny, like I think depending on where in my life you've met me, like you'd probably have different perceptions of my level of this, but like I always think about like the feeling of shyness like in my own head and body like throughout my life kind of and just like even throughout my career and stuff like that, getting into leadership roles where I'm like people managing and things like that, you kind of have to like shove that down and just like talk and be a leader. And really that's probably a bad way to say it because a lot of leading is listening in my opinion, like and being
Mhm.
responsive to that stuff. But I think more along the lines of just like being able to lead with confidence and things like that has always been really challenging for me. And I think a big part of that is just like this feeling of imposter syndrome, kind of what we were talking about earlier. And also, I think, I'm a younger sibling, like I'm a little brother, so kind of growing up and trying to find my own voice versus like being the little brother, just things like that that have kind of followed me around in life. And I'm an introvert, so but I think what I've found is that writing and and being able to like publish stuff and see excuse me see like the immediate reaction to those thoughts has been just like overwhelmingly the most cathartic and transformative thing I've done for my own voice in my entire life. And like I think it it's not something that like I think if you looked at my content or even listen to this podcast or something like that, like you'd be like, oh, like it just happened overnight, but it really wasn't like that. It was like, two or more years of like sort of just like little tiny steps and pushing against that and taking small risks and things like that. So I think for me, and like I think you can hear now, like I'm more I'm more willing to open my mouth and speak, but like I think it's because I've put in a ton of work on just being like, I'm gonna say this thing, and if it fails, like I'm gonna fail, and that is what it is. But like I'm not gonna beat myself up over it. And I think that's a lot of the stuff that I felt that was like shutting me up in a way was a fear of that shame, that self shame, like where it's like you say something and you're like, oh, like how can I like face everybody after I fail in front of them, but like nobody cares, like nobody's thinking about you. And that was the biggest thing for me was like realizing that and this is like a hard thing for me. I still like have a hard time swallowing it sometimes, but like a lot of the stuff that I think or a lot of the reason that I think I've been quiet through my life has been tied to ego. and like being afraid of seeing my ego crushed in front of people.
Mm.
And so when you start to release that and be like, you know what, I don't care, like just let it die, let it get beat up in front of me kind of thing, then you start to get this freedom of like, oh, like you can just say this thing, and if people don't like it, like that, obviously you want to be, respectful and relatable and things like that. So I'm not saying, it gives you a license to be a jerk or whatever, but I think it does free you in a way of like this like cycle of overthinking and this, getting stuck in feeling like you just don't, you have all these things you want to say, or you have, you know, this kind of feeling that you should be saying things, but you just don't know how to get through that. And so I think if I had any advice, it's that um, writing in small amounts every day and putting it in front of people. And it doesn't need to be on LinkedIn. Like it could be just making an effort to get outside of your bubble, like texting people, writing worked for me, and that kind of helped me find my speaking voice too. But um, it may be other, some people may be more verbal too. I think there's differences there, but I think yeah, putting in that time and that effort of just like, I'm gonna put something out there every day where someone else can hear it and see me, and really focusing on connection versus just broadcasting. Like, okay, what if I'm talking to this person, if I'm publishing on this platform, who is it for, and what is it that's going to be relatable? Um, because those are the things that I think, again, like if you're if you're taking the time to say something, if you're taking the time to publish something, it's for someone else. It's not just for you. And so I think taking the attention off yourself, and again off that ego, and just being like, what can I give? What can I like um what can I put out there that would entertain or be relatable or things like that? Like then it just becomes so much less pressure and so much less like it's about me, and it's really just about like what I'm giving to that, to the audience, if that makes sense. So not sure if that, that was a bit of a longer answer, but I think that's kind of what I'm getting to is like I think putting in that persistent, regular effort, and taking the attention off yourself, I think it helps to get out of that quietness and that shyness. And I still feel it. Like I still, before I hit post, I still feel that like, "Ugh, what if, but it's so
Yeah.
much less than it was before that. Yeah, I think it's helped a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of like that exposure therapy of just doing it over and over. But yeah, I totally agree. Those small steps are really important. I mean, that's what probably got any of us to where we are today when you think back on it, just taking small intentional steps. Yeah, but I like that kind of removing the focus from yourself and shifting it onto, how can I help others? How can I connect with my audience and highlight others too. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, anything else before we wrap up that you either want people to know about you, or a closing thought?
Um, I think, feel free to find me on LinkedIn and, um, send me a DM, or jump into one of my posts and comment. I try to, like I said, I'm trying to respond to all of them. And, um, I'm still really like, that's my favorite part about all this is just connecting with people and meeting people. And I've been trying to meet more people offline too, and coffee chats and things like that. Um, like I think that one of the biggest like shifts for me in my own kind of like identity or mindset was moving away from marketer, like thinking of myself as a marketer and thinking about myself more as like a communicator. And so that has helped me sort of like orient my goals and my like what I'm doing every day, and thinking about like more in that direction versus just like again marketing and pushing things through this filter of like will it sell, or will it do this or that. And so yeah, find me on there if you want to chat. Um, and I think yeah, I'm just excited about like seeing everybody kind of zoom out of like where we've been with LinkedIn, and really just marketing in general, and sort of look again at like how we can connect with each other as people, because it's crazy. We've got AI, we've got robots on the internet and things like that. And I like to see people connecting and like kind of getting around that and finding ways to still be themselves and build those human relationships, even though things are changing so fast and so crazy. So yeah,
Yeah, it's time for sure. I think that's a big part of, why things are shifting and why people are looking for connection in a different way than maybe they were before through the internet because of, yeah, all the influx of everything you just mentioned.
yeah,
It's a lot.
yeah, yeah, especially in marketing too. I think like there's a big sort of not pressure, but I think there's like this unsaid expectation to kind of like, be on top of all those shifts and be learning all the tools and be using them and having an opinion on all of them. And it's like kind of like, but the point of marketing is to connect with people and to be able to put something out there that people respond to. And really to shift the market. And so I think a lot of that stuff becomes noise and just kind of gets in the way of really the communicative aspect of it. So yeah.
It does for sure. Quick example before we close. I was just talking with a client and they had made a video ad with an AI voiceover and it just
Mhm.
me and my team were like, we can't we can't run this. It's not gonna
Yeah.
do what we wanted to do. So like I re-recorded the voiceover just in my human voice. Not that I'm like a voiceover magician or anything. It's just something I like to do. And it's just so much better. Same exact video, pretty much the same words, but just like having a human read it makes it feel so much more relatable. It's crazy.
I not to push this longer, but I agree, and I saw something exactly similar where somebody had created an ad with ChatGPT that was like, you know, the image was just a person holding the product, and I was like, why? What, like go get a real person to do that. Like that's not, there's nothing about that image. It's one thing if you're creating an image that's really creative and like it's like this kind of the CGI effect where, you're like, you couldn't do that without AI, but it's like, why are you, jumping through hoops just to put out stuff that's cheap and fast when it's not good? You know what I mean? And so I think we got to think about who's looking at it and what they would think if they were to know that that was created with a machine versus a real person, because the concept of the image is the person is standing behind the product. They support it, they endorse it, they like it. And if that person isn't real to begin with, what are we looking at? You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's a weird
yeah,
thing.
I agree. We had to do a quick AI tangent. It happens every episode.
It's hard not to acknowledge the robot in the room, but yeah.
It really is. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nick. This was a really fun episode for me. I think the listeners will really enjoy getting to know you better.
Thanks so much for having me, Kayla. It was great to chat.